This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and in each episode I will invite an expert guest to discuss a topic or subject that will enhance your knowledge and hopefully inspire you on your leadership journey. If managing people is becoming your biggest headache, then check out the How to Lead Your Team with Confidence course and join the next group program starting soon. So let's see who's in the hot seat today. Today I'm talking to Mark Evans. Mark has spent over 25 years combining the needs of business with bespoke software. He's the architect behind countless cloud-based software as a service tools and systems. His journey has taken him on an unconventional route, weaving him through all levels of business, locally, nationally and internationally. From humble beginnings through to the founding of 4 businesses, engaging with the highest level in government and providing critical line of business services for one of the world's largest organisations. It is clear that life in the virtual world has no boundaries. He believes bespoke software can provide most businesses with the edge in a competitive world. I hope you enjoy this chat we had about software efficiency, and I'll catch you all on the other side. Mark, welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is one of the podcasts which has come together quite quickly because we were only really talking about a week ago. Sometimes it takes weeks or months to bring something together, but this one seems to have happened quite quickly. So that's a good sign, and that it's obviously meant to happen. It came out of one of our sort of one-to-ones we have in our sort of local networking, didn't it? And we were talking about what we did, and it was quite an interesting conversation. And I thought I would sort of bring that conversation over into the podcast for others to listen to. So we're going to be talking about what you do and the software efficiency subject. But before we do that, I'll ask the question that I ask all my guests, and that is, why do you do what you do, and what was the pivotal moment that took you down this path?
Okay, thank you. That's a little bit of a complex question in many respects, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do in the beginning. As we all sort of leave school and we think, what are we going to do? And I ended up as a tyre fitter for a good number of years before I decided that I really wanted to sort of continue my sort of passion for computing. So I took various paths that allowed me to sort of get to a position where I was able to start programming software and developing software, but that took quite a while. It took probably until I was mid-25s, I suppose, before I got that opportunity. From that point on, and because of the experiences I was going through at the time as a production manager for a vending manufacturing company, we needed to have software to drive those processes. And although we did get some external help initially, it wasn't particularly good at delivering what we needed. Although it was bespoke software, it was very early days, and trying to translate what you needed for a situation across to someone, and then put that into software back in that sort of period of time, 1994, 95 time. It was quite a difficult thing. Software was fairly rigid. So I decided to take it on myself and started developing the software platforms for the production and dispatching and the invoicing and the sales order processing and stock control and that kind of thing. And that's what gave me a real passion for actually making that connection between software and the business world. Before that, I played around with various computers, but it wasn't until that time when I started thinking, this is going to be helpful as we move forward. Not really understanding at that point how helpful it would be in my future career, but it certainly gave me my grounding. And over the next 5 years, I started writing the software that drove that organisation, and it became a £35 million organisation. And it was bought out by an American company in 1999, which gave me a great opportunity. And that was the pivotal point, really, is we were being bought out. I had an option to stay with the organisation and possibly work in the States and be able to sort of come in and go whenever I wanted to from the States, or set up something for my own benefits, a company born out of that passion, and wanting to put those connections together, talk to business leaders, talk to organizations and smaller companies that needed that helping hand with software. How could we really use the knowledge they have and the knowledge that I had at the time, and combine them in software? And that was the driving point, really. And from there on, for the last 20 years, we've been helping many organizations to deliver through software efficiencies.
Right, yeah. So it seems like a sort of a logical sort of path you've taken, and obviously now you're doing things that you really want to do. I can remember back to when I was first introduced to computers, and that was back at school, using the BBC Micro and doing all that stuff with DOS and all that. So, it didn't really light me up, to be honest, because it was a bit too. All that stuff was a bit too in depth, and I didn't really get fired up with it. But when I did actually embrace computers was when I was running my retail business, and I saw the opportunity to bring in the scanning systems that we are so used to now. We were one of the first to bring it in, and what I noticed was that a lot of retailers were only using part of the system, and I'm sure this is what you come across all the time with maybe a bespoke system. Only using a tiny part of it, and the rest of it is wasted. Now, we try to embrace and use everything, and one of the things we did was we used like the stock control system, and you've already mentioned stock control as one of the things. But that's had such a massive influence on the way our business run that software is, if you get it right, can make a massive difference. So I'm an advocate of software and how it can really help your business. But something that I noticed on your website, you talk about free software or software that's off the peg, which is good for some things, but obviously not for other things. So do you want to just talk about what those things are good for, those software packages are good for, and maybe when they don't really serve purpose?
Yeah, sure. I think any organisation that's worth a salt are going to be looking for an investment, whether that's in software or something else. But I think from a software point of view, the first thing that an organisation needs to do is just to see whether there's something out there on the shelf that can fit their needs. It's more than likely that it won't fit their needs to 100%, or most probably only sort of 50%, 60% if possible. And they will probably find that the rest of it is really just bells and whistles that will never get used at all, which brings in issues of training. And suddenly you've got staff that are using a piece of software that can take them down many different roads that perhaps you don't want them to go down, and you don't, as a business strategy, want certain parts of that software being used, but nevertheless it's there and it will be played with and it's a distraction and so on. So once an organization's identified that actually a piece of software off the shelf, although perhaps fits to a degree, it doesn't fit exactly, it's time to look at the bespoke world. And the bespoke world is more expensive, as you'd expect, really, because what's happening there is that a consultant will come in, he'll understand your requirements, she'll then wrap that software process around your business. So it becomes a number of things at that point. It becomes an asset of your business. It's not a liability, and that's the kind of person you want involved in and working with, is a company that sees software as an asset, because it can be sold on with your business. So it's an important factor. It's also going to be much more efficient. You're going to be able to almost lock in your IP. So if you're specifically unique in the way you do business, then that information is going to be locked into that software and becomes valuable, becomes a tool to be able to de-scale a particular part of the process or the job. And that can free up then those resources to be applied in other areas that are much more important, perhaps, or need much more of an expertise. So it's an enabler. It really enables a business. So I'm a big advocate of software that's designed around your organization. And another part of it is being able to expand, because not everyone will stay in the same boxes year on year. They'll want to expand, they'll change, they'll pivot, especially in environments like we are in today. You have to pivot quite well, and that software needs to be able to pivot with you. Off-the-shelf software is very rigid. It won't pivot because there's too many people pivoting in different ways, whereas a piece of software that's bespoke, that's been designed for you, will actually allow you to pivot. Obviously, you've got to have the support and the maintenance agreements behind that to be able to switch and move and extend that software. But nevertheless, it's a real benefit to be able to have that facility.
Yeah. Just for those listeners that might be listening to this way in the future, we're recording this right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's why we've mentioned about the certain situations that are going on at the moment. But it's interesting what you said there, because obviously there's a cost involved. There's a cost involved with obviously developing the software, but there's also the first thing that I guess you've got to think about is actually the potential saving, and also understanding the internal processes that are going to change because of the software.
Yes, indeed. I mean, you do need to understand that that return on investment has to be there, because there's no point spending a lot of money on something that's not really going to deliver what you need it to deliver. So a common mistake is that we'll get engaged with a client, we'll then start working on the client, and then they can't release the resources that are needed to be able to make sure that software delivers what it's meant to deliver. And sometimes you'll get to a situation where it actually doesn't deliver, and it needs changing, and that's the scope slippage that creeps in, which just creates more cost and many delays. So if you're going to commit to bespoke software, you need to make sure those resources are available so that software can be released and matches the requirements where they're laid down.
Yes, and interesting what you say about return on investment. Obviously, that's what most businesses will want to know. Is there a sort of an average that these projects tend to pay back in?
There isn't an average really, but it's certainly tied into scale, because the bigger organisations will, with more staff and maybe processes that are interlocked through the software, can leverage greater savings. If you're looking at a small company that's just locking in maybe 10, 20, 30 staff in the process of the software creation, then there will definitely be a saving. There has to be. And if we get to a stage where, certainly within my organisation, if we identify that this cost is going to grow and the benefits there aren't going to be realised, then we'll make that clear and as transparent upfront as possible. And in fact, it's one of the markers that you need to do when you're engaging an organisation, is identify how it can be measured, what that success rate is going to be, whether that's purely operational or whether it's pushing your service online and then you start looking at subscribers, or whether there's another measure such as time saving. But that's key to getting a successful project complete. Yes,
and one of the other, obviously, what's allowed this, I guess, and helped you a great deal is the cloud-based systems, and I guess that's what you rely on these days, is using that. So you haven't got to send out a load of software that's got to be updated on systems, which must make a big difference to the way you roll things out.
Yes, indeed. Well, as I mentioned earlier on, we started K-Base back in 2000, and in the first probably 6 months or so, we were still delivering software that would require installation onto a desktop and sending out of CDs back then. And it wasn't long into the process of disseminating this software that we felt that we need to move and take advantage of the internet as it was growing. It was very young. But back in 2000, 2001, we started developing for our clients websites that had extendability and secure areas. And they became really the first ASP, they were called back then, but they were cloud applications, because we were using their website to sort of hop off the back of a secure zone that was also stored in the cloud, in their hosted environment. And that gave us the opportunity to then just distribute to one place. Updates were made, and users had the benefit immediately of seeing those updates in place.
Yeah, and it's interesting, actually. One of the frustrations I've had in the past is certain website software which is used extensively but is constantly being updated. And I've had previous websites which were working one day and not the next. And the reason why they weren't working was because there had been an unexpected update. And I suppose that's one thing that you can obviously not worry about when you've got your own software. You'll only update it when it needs to be updated.
Yeah, that's it. And you're fully aware of the process and what's happening, and you're able to communicate that with your clients beforehand as well. We tend to try to make updates before the normal working hours for our clients, sometimes at weekends as well, if that's what they require. If they're large organisations, they've got lots of staff. We've had clients in the past that have had representatives all around the globe. So we had no break in the timeline for us to be able to make adjustments. So we had to install the updates exactly when we felt that it was of least impact. But because they were completely around the globe, then they were always there, always available to be interrupted, unfortunately.
Yeah. And this leads nicely onto the governance and the compliance things that obviously you're able to cover now, and making sure that everything is very much in line with the company and the business's objectives, and making sure that everything is like there's one copy of everything. And I think when you're using bespoke software, sometimes you can have different versions floating around. I'm sure that's probably something you've come across in the past.
Yeah, it is. Yes, I mean, from a software point of view, as you say, exactly right. There's a central software that's running on the service, so there's no duplications. You're using the latest version of that software, but that rolls over to the information assurance element of businesses and business requirements, and the knowledge that they have internally and how that's communicated. Because you do get a situation whereby, certainly when organisations are being audited and perhaps the staff are printing out information and documentation, that information, as soon as it's printed, is out of date. And that controlling mechanism that you have when things are online, and yes, they can see the latest version and they can read it, is lost if you're not careful once those documents are printed out. So we try to cater for both online and offline tethering to ensure that they match, to make sure that the printed version actually matches the online version. And if they don't match, then there's a mechanism to flag that up. But you're dead right in that that's the baseline for governance, for compliance, for risk management. And that's all about having that information available centrally, confidentially, and it retains its integrity.
Yeah. And you've mentioned taking out the unnecessary complexity. Obviously, it's about simplifying, but obviously making sure that everything is there that needs to be for the business. And obviously, once you've got that information, that obviously enhances the reporting that you can actually introduce, I guess.
Yes, indeed. The reporting, again, it's down to the individual organisation to at the point of design. So we go through quite a rigorous requirement specification, functional specification phase when we're looking at software to develop, and it's important to try to sort of line up all the ducks at that point in time. So we would look at the requirements of different aspects of the business, whether there was any way of actually trying to re-engineer the process to make it simpler before it's put into a piece of software, and then we would work with other departments that may have to interact with that software. And at that point, we define those reports. So the report definitions will then be decided, which can be changed, obviously, as we go through. But we would try to sort of pin those definitions for reporting from the beginning.
Yeah, I was going to actually mention that connectivity, not always just internally, but I suppose these days you've got to be able to connect to other systems, and obviously other systems want to connect into that system. So is that one of the biggest challenges you have with like connecting to other systems?
It used to be a big challenge. When systems weren't so interoperable and they were in different languages, it wasn't until common languages for that connectivity started to appear, and you could create APIs that can be read across different pieces of software, regardless of what code they were written in and what language they were written in. So APIs are key and crucial these days. And an API, which is an application programming interface, is really the same as a human interface, but everything's done automatically. So if you're entering data, you're putting in your name, address, and phone number in through a screen on your keyboard, the computer is doing the same, but directly to the piece of software in the background. So you still have to have those validation processes. You still have to say, is this a valid email address? Is this a valid phone number? Is this a number that I'm asking for in this field, or is it a piece of text? All those kind of things still have to exist. But because we now have that common language, then talking to pieces of software that you want to integrate with, it isn't so much of a problem these days.
Yeah. So it's all sort of, I thought it's all sort of falling into line as obviously businesses need it to be that way, because and I suppose there's no point in having 50 different languages that don't talk to themselves if and that makes businesses not being able to connect to others, because we know that's how things work, is that we're able to connect. Whether it's people, whether it's software, whatever it is, we need to be able to connect with people, and that API system sounds like it gets over that and makes that happen, which is great. So I think before we just wrap things up, it'd be worth mentioning one of the things I noticed on your website is that you are a trusted partner of What's Right, and I'm guessing this is something to do with why you do what you do, or something to do with your values. I'd be interested to know What's Right and how that came about.
Yeah, of course. Well, What's Right was co-founded by myself and a guy called John Tiley around about sort of 12, 13 years ago now. And it was born out of the fact that we'd both done a lot of networking in the past, and we understood the value of networking. But we felt that some of the organizations that we were working or networking with at the time were very sort of centered on numbers of members and their own pockets, perhaps, in the nicest possible sense. And we felt that although they have to survive and they have to make a profit, that perhaps another networking group that was focused on local good causes would be the better way to go. So we set up What's Right, and that's all about members of What's Right in the network sense, have the traditional facilities of coming along to a meeting every month and being able to network past business and carry out one-to-one meetings. But instead of a monthly fee, we would request a monthly donation, and that donation would then go into a central pot, which would then, at regular intervals throughout the year, be distributed to local good causes. So Jessie May and the Well Place Project, Children's Hospice Southwest, the Rainbow Centre, and organisations very much like that are doing fabulous work day in, day out, get some recognition. So that's been very successful. We've got a number of members already in the Bristol region, and we're looking at other areas as well. It's something that I don't necessarily get involved in on a day-to-day basis anymore because of other commitments, but I'm still obviously as a co-founder very fond of the networking and the idea behind the social responsibility element and providing money into the good causes that are local to us.
Yeah, and I think that's really important with any business. It's just giving something back and doing something that really makes you feel as if you are, well, doing more than just running a business. You're actually making a difference, to your community, which I think more and more these days is really important, connecting to the wider community, and so that they recognise what you're doing, and there's only good that come out of that. So hats off to you for that. This sounds a great initiative. So unfortunately, time is running out as they tend to with these podcasts. We don't get an awful lot of time. It's not really designed to go into too much detail, but obviously my listeners can check you out on your website, which will be in all the show notes. So before we finish, what would be your top 3 tips to leave the listeners when they may be considering going down the route of bespoke software?
Okay. I think we've probably covered those tips during the conversation already, but just to sort of highlight them again, I think firstly, it's ensuring that bespoke software is right for your business, making sure that it will fit the need, and there's no off-the-shelf software that can actually fit that need. And so that would be tip 1. So make sure that it does fit the need. Number 2, if you're then engaged in the idea of bespoke software, make sure that your provider has the experience that you need in and the background in making sure that they can deliver what you've got to deliver through whatever form that may be, whether that's as a fully cloud-based standalone operation, maybe in a private cloud, or whether that's public. Make sure they've got the infrastructure to be able to do that, from the design, the development support, and then the securing of that piece of software, because security is very important. And then thirdly, perhaps it's about the approach. Try to engage with someone that has an agile approach to the development, which means that you can start to get a minimum viable product up and running very quickly, and you don't have to wait for the traditional 6 months to a year before it's finished and then start tweaking it. It's all about being able to deliver the minimum viable products, perhaps in a month or 2 months, and then another 2 months there's a new part of it coming out. And as long as it's planned right, it can give you immense benefits doing it that way.
Great stuff. And as I said at the beginning, when I introduced the system into the retail business, when it was right, it made a massive difference. So I know how software can really make a big difference within a business. So thank you for your time today, Mark. It's been really interesting, and I hope the listeners have got lots of value about it and got you thinking about how maybe those off the peg systems are doing a job, but maybe they could be a bespoke system might be the right thing to do at some point in the time of the business and where it's going. So yes, thank you very much for your time, Mark.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And I will see you again very shortly, hopefully.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode, please take the time to leave a review on your chosen platform and share on social media. Don't forget to check out the Reluctant Leader Academy, where you'll find a free 15 questions every manager should be asking themselves checklist that you can download to keep you on track every day. Leadership is a choice. When you understand the right mindset, know the process to follow, and use key skills to keep things moving forward, you'll be on track to leave a lasting legacy. Until next time, be the best you can be and the inspiration for others to follow.